this, it tells you what law enforcement, which we don't get to see because of this kind of work. We don't get to see exactly what the FBI is doing, what other law enforcement partners are doing to try and thwart these threats that we have recently heard the FBI director, Christopher Wray, talk about. We don't get to see this work until it comes to this, until it comes to a day like today. The other thing that I think it's important to note is when we heard the prosecutors there speak and how they talked about that this is a time period of discourse, of fighting across the nation, and while it's okay to disagree with politics, it should not turn violent. So clearly, from listening to them, you can tell there's a lot of concern across the country about the discourse, the political discourse, what's going on, the fighting across the country. Law enforcement is really on high alert for this. And I think this plot, what is alleged in this complaint, certainly shows that. I mean, they were talking about, according to the complaint, snatch and grab, just grabbing the governor, storming the Capitol, ways in which they could kidnap her. They talked about getting a taser. They talked about finding a location to take her to. I mean, this was far along in the process, and the months that they spent and the work that the FBI did to get inside this group, I think that's very important to note. They didn't just use one informant. They had at least two informants. They had undercovers inside this operation. Because of the level of concern surrounding this, I think all of this is so notable, Brianna.
Yeah, you mentioned just the actions they'd already taken, that one of the suspects, Adam Fox, had already bought a taser, that they had talked about a highway bridge where they could plant an explosive, that they had discussed this plan to divert police with an explosion, and that they'd already practiced carrying out that explosion, that 2 times they had done coordinated surveillance on the governor's vacation home. And, Deputy Director, I want to ask you about something that Shimon pointed out, which was Matthew Schneider saying we can disagree about politics, we should not resort to violence. I mean, you can talk about what happened here, and there are a lot of questions we do not have answers to. We do not know the motives here. We do not know everything about this group. But this is something, just for context, that as we had seen demonstrations against some of the coronavirus restrictions that were underway in Michigan, you had the president tweeting in April, "Liberate Michigan." He was tweeting support as well for protesters, some of whom were armed. I mean, this is a situation in Michigan that has been tense and has not been tamped down by the rhetoric coming out of the White House.
That's absolutely right. So a couple of things come to mind. First, the FBI analyzes these plots along 2 factors. When they hear about this sort of, when they pick up on this sort of language, they're trying to determine if the group has the intent and capability to pull off what they're talking about. Here, you absolutely see that in spades, just from what little we know from the complaint and what was discussed at the press conference. Clear intent, and I would add the specific mention of doing this before the election gives you great insight to the fact that this group is looking for some sort of political impact. And capability, purchasing the taser, putting their money together, several meetings, conducting surveillance, the test detonation. So this is a very serious thing. As far as the political discourse angle goes, I don't think you could possibly overstate this. So let's think back just for a minute. We know that in 2016, one of the Russians' primary objectives was to sow exactly this sort of sentiment: discord, chaos, distrust in each other and in our democratic process. We also know from what the intelligence folks in our country have told us in the last few weeks that they are continuing that same campaign. But let's not be mistaken here, Brianna. The person most responsible for fomenting this sort of unrest, this sort of division, this sort of violence in this country right now is the President of the United States. The Russians simply have to amplify the messages that President Trump is putting out on a daily basis, constantly berating the democratic process, claiming it's a rigged game, claiming it's replete with fraud, all of which we know is false. But it is exactly that sort of rhetoric that causes extremists to feel like now is the time to take action. It serves as a sort of trigger for folks who are already violent, maybe unstable, pointed in that direction anyway. That encouragement from someone like the President of the United States cannot possibly be overstated. It is dangerous, and we now see that happening on the streets of Michigan.
We have seen some individuals hear what the president has to say, interpret it as a call to action. Some of them are in prison right now. Andrew McCabe, former FBI deputy director. Shimon Prokupecz, great reporting. Thank you so much. We do have